Let me ask you something honest. You are doing everything you were told to do, eating reasonably, not living on junk food, maybe even exercising, but you still wake up exhausted. The belly fat will not move. Your energy crashes by early afternoon. Your brain feels sluggish before noon. And every doctor, every friend, every article you come across just keeps saying the same thing. That is just what getting older feels like. But what if that explanation is not just incomplete? What if it is actually steering you away from the real answer? Because here is what 24 years inside a clinical setting has shown me. The exhaustion people over 60 are experiencing is not primarily caused by the number on their birth certificate. It is caused by what is happening inside their cells right now, today, this week. And the reason it feels so impossible to fight is because most people have never been given the actual biological explanation for why it is happening. What if three specific biological processes are quietly accelerating inside your body simultaneously, and all three of them are being made significantly worse by something as simple as what you are drinking every single morning? And what if that same morning habit, changed in one precise and simple way, could directly work against all three processes at once? No complicated supplement stack, no protocol that collapses the first time life gets busy. One change to something you are already doing, something that takes less than 2 minutes to do differently. The science behind this is not wellness trend content. It is grounded in decades of research in metabolic medicine, mitochondrial biology, and cellular aging. And it is the kind of information most people over 60 have simply never been given in a clear and practical way. Stay with me through this entire video. By the end, you will not just have a strategy, you will understand your own biology in a way that makes consistency natural rather than forced. You will know exactly why you are doing what you are doing, and that understanding is what makes results stick. I am Dr. Megan Foster. I have spent over 24 years working directly with patients navigating metabolic disease, chronic fatigue, stubborn weight gain, muscle loss, and age-related cognitive decline. I have sat across from thousands of people who were frustrated and convinced their bodies had simply turned against them. And almost without exception, the missing piece was not effort. It was the right biological information. Once people understood what was actually happening in their cells, the path forward became clear, and the results followed. Before we get into the science, quickly, if you want a structured roadmap for aging with more energy, stronger muscle, and better metabolic health, I put together a free longevity guide covering the core principles we discuss on this channel in a simple, actionable format. No extremes, no complicated protocols. The link is in the description below. It is free. Now let us get into the biology. Here is the foundational reality that almost no one over 60 has been clearly given. After 60, your body does not just slow down gradually and evenly. It undergoes a very specific metabolic shift. And that shift, if you do not understand and address it, compounds on itself year after year in a way that accelerates nearly every symptom people associate with getting older. The fatigue, the belly fat that does not respond to eating less, the muscle that disappears no matter how much protein you consume, the cognitive fog that descends in the afternoon. These are not random symptoms. They are all downstream of the same biological process. To understand the shift, you need to understand something fundamental about how your cells generate energy. Your body runs on two primary fuels: glucose, which comes from carbohydrates, and fat. When you are young and metabolically healthy, your body moves between these two fuel sources with relative ease. After a meal, it burns glucose. Between meals, during fasting, during sustained movement, it shifts toward fat. This ability to smoothly switch between fuels is called metabolic flexibility, and it is one of the most important markers of metabolic health that almost nobody discusses in a general medical context. Here is what changes as people age. Metabolic flexibility declines. The ability to switch from glucose burning to fat burning weakens progressively. Your body becomes increasingly reliant on glucose as its primary and, in many cases, almost exclusive fuel source. This is called glucose dependency. And in the context of aging biology, it creates a cascade of problems that compound on each other year after year. Your cells produce energy inside structures called mitochondria. Every moment you feel alert and energized, your mitochondria are doing their job well. Every moment you feel drained and foggy, you are experiencing mitochondria that are underproducing. After 60, mitochondria decline in two ways simultaneously. Their number decreases, and the efficiency of the ones that remain drops. Your cells have fewer energy generators running at reduced capacity. This is called mitochondrial decline, and it is one of the most consistently documented findings in aging research over the past 3 decades. Glucose dependency makes this significantly worse. When cells burn glucose for energy, the process produces byproducts called free radicals. These are essentially cellular exhaust. In small amounts, your body manages them fine. But when glucose is your dominant fuel year after year, free radical accumulation exceeds what your antioxidant systems can fully handle. The damage lands directly on the mitochondria, which are already declining due to age. Fewer mitochondria, producing less energy, being damaged faster by the very fuel your body depends on most. The result is exactly what most people over 60 describe: a persistent fatigue that does not resolve with rest, recovery that takes longer than it used to, a baseline energy level that just keeps dropping. Now, the second process, this one surprises most people when they hear it explained clearly. Your body maintains a population of adult stem cells that circulate through your system, serving as your internal repair infrastructure. When muscle breaks down from daily wear, stem cells rebuild it. When your gut lining thins, stem cells restore it. When tissue anywhere in your body needs renewal, stem cells are the mechanism your body uses to do that work. When these cells are healthy and well preserved, they exist in what researchers call a state of quiescence. Think of this as protective rest. The cells are conserving their capacity, ready to be called into action when genuinely needed. When your metabolic environment is chronically stressed, when blood sugar frequently spikes and crashes, when inflammation is persistently elevated, stem cells are pushed out of that protective resting state prematurely. They are activated by the stress signals in the environment even when no actual tissue repair is needed. They burn through their functional capacity faster than they naturally should, and over time, your body's ability to repair and regenerate diminishes at an accelerated rate. This is why people who have not paid attention to metabolic health often describe a distinct turning point in their 60s. Recovery just stops happening the way it used to. A joint that would have resolved in a week takes months. Muscle loss during illness does not come back. A large part of the reason is that the stem cell reserves enabling that recovery have been prematurely depleted by years of metabolic stress. The third process ties everything together. When your body becomes heavily glucose dependent, several things happen simultaneously that most people experience as separate problems, but are actually one problem with multiple faces. Fat burning slows dramatically. Your body has glucose available and will always reach for it first. The fat stored deep around your organs, called visceral fat, sits largely untouched because your body simply does not need to access it when sugar is always in circulation. This is a primary reason calorie restriction alone often fails to reduce belly fat after 60. You can eat significantly less and still not be in the metabolic state required to actually access those deep stores. The signal to burn them is never being generated. Insulin remains elevated for longer periods after meals, and chronically elevated insulin, sustained over months and years, is linked to increased fat storage, systemic inflammation, declining hormone production, and accelerated cognitive decline. Cellular repair becomes deprioritized. When your body is in constant glucose processing mode, the deep maintenance and regeneration that happens during a fat-burning, low-insulin state gets pushed back. Your cells are in production mode, not repair mode. And after 60, repair mode is exactly what you need more of. These three processes, mitochondrial decline, stem cell depletion, and glucose dependency, feed into each other and amplify each other. They all accelerate at roughly the same phase of life, which is why the shift people feel in their 60s can seem so sudden and total. The compounding was happening quietly for years. At some point, it crossed a threshold you could feel. But here is what changes the picture entirely. All three of these processes are metabolically addressable. The internal environment driving them can be shifted, and the mechanism for shifting it is the production of a molecule called beta-hydroxybutyrate, which researchers call BHB. BHB is a ketone, and when it is circulating in your bloodstream, your body receives a set of very specific biological signals. Fat is available. Shift away from glucose dependency. Activate mitochondrial rebuilding. Protect stem cells. Reduce inflammatory signaling. Prioritize cellular repair. These are not metaphors. These are the documented downstream effects of BHB on the pathways just described. And the way to generate consistent BHB every single morning without changing your entire diet, without extended fasting, without any extreme intervention, is through a specific type of fat called C8-MCT oil added to your morning coffee. Let me explain exactly what C8-MCT oil is and why it produces this effect faster than anything else. MCT stands for medium-chain triglycerides. Most dietary fats are long-chain. Olive oil, butter, avocado oil, the fat in meat and dairy. Long-chain fats go through a slow, multi-step digestive pathway. They are packaged into transport structures, sent through the lymphatic system, and only reach the liver after this entire process completes. It takes time, and it produces essentially no ketone output in a well-fed state. C8-MCT oil, also called caprylic acid, bypasses this entire pathway. It is absorbed directly from the intestine into the bloodstream and travels immediately to the liver. No lymphatic detour, direct delivery, and once the liver receives C8, it converts it to BHB almost instantly. This is the fastest route from dietary fat to circulating ketones that exists in human metabolism. One important note on product selection. Many commercially available MCT oil products contain significant amounts of C12, which is called lauric acid. C12 behaves more like a long-chain fat in the body, follows the slow lymphatic pathway, and produces very little ketone output. Always read the label. Look specifically for pure C8 or caprylic acid. If the product lists only generic MCT oil without specifying the C8 content, you may be getting almost none of the active compound responsible for rapid ketone production. Now, why does morning specifically matter? After a full night without food, your body has been in a natural fasting state for 7 to 9 hours. Insulin has dropped to its resting baseline overnight. Your liver's glycogen stores, the glucose reserves it maintains as quick access fuel, have been partially depleted. By the time you wake up, your body is already leaning in the direction of fat burning. It has been producing low-level ketones during the later hours of the night. Adding C8-MCT oil on an empty stomach at this moment gives your body the precise trigger to commit fully to that direction. The liver receives C8 directly. It converts it to BHB within minutes. Ketones begin circulating. The fat-burning signal is confirmed and extended into your morning in a way it could not be if you had first eaten a carbohydrate-heavy breakfast, spiked your insulin, and locked yourself back into glucose processing mode. The coffee matters here beyond just being a vehicle for the MCT oil. Caffeine activates a process called lipolysis. That is the release of stored fat from fat cells into the bloodstream where it becomes available as circulating fuel. Caffeine mobilizes stored fat. C8-MCT oil then converts to BHB and confirms the fat-burning signal. One opens the door, the other walks through it. The combination produces a fat oxidation effect that neither coffee alone nor MCT oil alone can replicate. This is why morning coffee is not just a convenient delivery method. It is the ideal metabolic context for this strategy. Now, let me go through the biological benefits specifically, because the detail is what separates real understanding from surface level awareness. Starting with mitochondria, when your cells burn ketones instead of glucose, energy production generates significantly fewer free radicals per unit of energy produced. Your mitochondria are under less oxidative stress, less damage per unit of output. The generators last longer, but BHB goes further. It activates a specific protein called PGC1 alpha, sometimes called the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. When PGC1 alpha is activated, your cells receive a direct instruction to build new mitochondria, not just maintain existing ones, not just slow the rate of decline, actually produce new energy generators. After 60, when mitochondrial density is declining, this is a documented biological mechanism for rebuilding the cellular infrastructure behind your energy levels. It takes weeks and months of consistent daily BHB production, but the results, steadier energy, less fatigue, faster recovery, are genuine biological changes rather than stimulant effects. There is also a related process called mitophagy. This is your body's quality control system for mitochondria. It identifies damaged, dysfunctional mitochondria and removes them. The morning fasting window and ketone state both support mitophagy. Your body is not just building new mitochondria, it is simultaneously clearing out the damaged ones. The result over months is a mitochondrial population that is leaner and significantly more efficient. Now, BHB and stem cells. Ketone production reduces both the inflammatory signaling and the oxidative stress that push stem cells out of their protective resting state prematurely. When the metabolic environment is less stressful, stem cells are not being prematurely activated and depleted. Your body retains more of its regenerative capacity for longer. Muscle recovery after effort stays stronger. Tissue repair after minor injury is more complete. These changes are not dramatic or immediately visible, but compounded over years. The difference between a body whose stem cell population is being chronically stressed and one that is being protected is profound. BHB and visceral fat. Visceral fat, the fat surrounding your organs inside the abdominal cavity, is metabolically active tissue. It releases inflammatory hormones continuously. It interferes with insulin signaling. It is associated with cognitive decline, cardiovascular risk, and a wide range of metabolic problems, and it is notoriously resistant to loss in glucose-dependent people. When BHB is circulating, your body is in active fat-burning mode. Visceral fat becomes a fuel target. C8-MCT oil specifically has been shown across multiple studies to produce significantly greater fat oxidation than long-chain fats, even at identical caloric intake. Your body burns fat more aggressively when C8 is present. The belly fat you have struggled to move is not immune to change. It is simply not in the metabolic environment required for change. Create that environment every morning and the biology begins to respond. BHB and inflammation. Chronic low-grade systemic inflammation is not just a symptom of aging. Researchers now understand it to be one of the primary engines of the aging process itself. The term they use is inflammaging. The repeated blood sugar fluctuations of a glucose-heavy diet generate a constant low-level inflammatory burden that accumulates across years. BHB directly inhibits a protein complex called the NLRP3 inflammasome, which is one of the primary triggers of inflammatory signaling inside your cells. When BHB suppresses it, measurable reductions in inflammatory markers follow. Every morning you produce BHB, you are actively pushing back against the inflammatory environment that is driving how quickly you age. BHB in your brain. Your brain accounts for about 2% of your body weight, but consumes roughly 20% of your total daily energy, and it is deeply sensitive to the consistency of its fuel supply. Contrary to popular assumption, your brain does not run exclusively on glucose. It can run on ketones, and ketones provide a fundamentally different energy delivery experience than glucose does. Glucose-based brain fuel is tied to blood sugar levels, which fluctuate throughout the day with meal timing. The pattern most people experience as mid-morning fog or afternoon cognitive heaviness is the brain losing stable fuel as blood sugar dips. BHB is produced continuously once the fat-burning signal is established. It does not spike and crash. The brain receives a steady, consistent energy supply throughout the morning. Within the first 1 to 2 weeks of consistent morning ketone production, most people notice a quality of mental clarity they had not felt in some time. Not an artificial stimulant alertness, a calm, stable sharpness, easier access to words and thoughts, better sustained focus. The fog that had become a daily expectation begins to lift. This is the brain running on a cleaner, more consistent fuel supply. BHB and muscle preservation. After 60, a condition called sarcopenia, the gradual loss of muscle tissue with age, begins to accelerate. Muscle is not just cosmetic. It is your primary metabolic organ. It is where most of your body's blood sugar gets absorbed and used. It protects joints. It keeps you independent and functional. Losing muscle lowers your metabolic rate and progressively reduces your quality of life. One primary driver of accelerated muscle loss after 60 is gluconeogenesis. When your body needs glucose and cannot find enough from dietary sources, it breaks down amino acids from muscle tissue to manufacture glucose. Your body uses its own muscle as fuel. This is one of the reasons cutting calories alone often produces more muscle loss than fat loss in people over 60. BHB is anti-catabolic. When ketones are circulating, your body has a clear signal that fat is available. The pressure to break down muscle for glucose is significantly reduced. Your muscle tissue is protected while fat stores are being accessed instead. When you combine this with adequate protein throughout the day and any form of resistance-based movement, even light resistance training, you create the conditions for reducing body fat while simultaneously preserving and improving muscle mass. That combination improves your metabolic rate, your physical capability, and your quality of life in ways that calorie restriction alone cannot produce. Now let me talk about your gut, because its connection to this strategy is underappreciated and directly relevant to how well everything we have discussed actually works. Your gut is one of the most metabolically active organs in your body. It houses a vast community of bacteria and other microorganisms called the gut microbiome. And your microbiome is in constant communication with your metabolic systems, your immune system, and your brain. After 60, the diversity and balance of the gut microbiome tends to decline. Species that promote metabolic health become less dominant. Species associated with inflammation can become more prevalent. When your gut lining is compromised, bacterial components from inside the gut can enter the bloodstream and trigger significant inflammatory responses throughout the body. This is one of the primary pathways through which poor metabolic health feeds into systemic inflammation. The sustained fasting window created by consuming only C8 MCT oil before your first full meal gives beneficial gut bacteria a rest period that supports microbial diversity. The reduction in systemic inflammation produced by BHB also helps protect the gut lining from the chronic irritation that degrades its integrity over time. So the morning strategy is not just working on your mitochondria and fat stores. It is also supporting the gut environment that is itself shaping your overall metabolic and immune health. Now, I also want to talk about something that most metabolic health conversations completely ignore, and that is how the time of day interacts with the effectiveness of this strategy. Your body operates on a roughly 24-hour internal clock, and virtually every organ and system has its own timing program synchronized to that clock. Your metabolism is no exception. Research over the past 15 years has shown clearly that your body's ability to process glucose, manage insulin, and shift into fat-burning mode is significantly influenced by the time of day, not just by what you eat. In the morning, in the first few hours after waking, your body's metabolic flexibility is at its peak. Your cortisol is naturally elevated, which supports fat mobilization and energy availability. Your liver is in a state that is highly receptive to the ketone producing signal from C8-MCT oil. Your muscles are most sensitive to the effects of movement and fuel signals. This morning biological window is not just convenient, it is physiologically optimal for initiating fat burning and ketone production. The same amount of C8-MCT oil consumed at 8 in the morning produces a stronger and more sustained ketone response than the same amount consumed at 3 in the afternoon, because your body's hormonal environment and metabolic orientation are fundamentally different at those two time points. This is why the strategy is specifically a morning strategy. It is not just about the fasting window, though that matters. It is about aligning the metabolic intervention with the time your body is most biologically prepared to respond to it. Working with your circadian biology amplifies every effect we have discussed. Now, let me address the connection between metabolic health and your hormones, because these two systems are more tightly linked than most people realize. And understanding the connection changes how you think about both. After 60, both men and women experience significant shifts in their primary sex hormones. Testosterone in men declines by roughly 1 to 2% per year from middle age onward. Estrogen and progesterone in women decline substantially through and after menopause. These hormonal shifts affect body composition, energy, mood, bone density, and cognitive function in ways most people feel clearly but rarely understand the metabolic connection to. The connection is direct. Testosterone, estrogen, and other steroid hormones are manufactured in your body from cholesterol, which is a fat-derived molecule. Your body needs a healthy fat metabolism to produce these hormones efficiently. When fat burning is chronically suppressed and your body is glucose dependent, the metabolic environment for optimal hormone production is compromised at a basic biochemical level. Additionally, visceral fat contains enzymes that actively convert testosterone into estrogen in both men and women. Elevated visceral fat in men directly lowers circulating testosterone and raises circulating estrogen, contributing to the fatigue, mood changes, and body composition shifts many men over 60 experience but do not connect to their metabolic health. In women postmenopause, excess visceral fat disrupts estrogen metabolism in ways that compound the metabolic and cardiovascular risk changes that follow menopause. By shifting your body into a fat-burning metabolic state through morning ketone production, you are also creating a more favorable environment for hormonal health. Visceral fat decreases over time, reducing the enzymatic testosterone to estrogen conversion. Fat metabolism improves, providing better raw material support for steroid hormone production. Insulin levels normalize, reducing the interference that chronic insulin elevation causes in multiple hormonal signaling pathways. The metabolic and hormonal systems support each other in both directions. When one improves, the other follows. Now, let me talk about the morning metabolic sequence, because how you structure the first few hours of your day around the C8-MCT oil makes a meaningful difference in how powerful the effect is. The sequence is straightforward. Wake up, do not eat. Consume C8-MCT oil blended into your morning coffee. Within an hour, take a 15 to 20-minute walk. 2 to 3 hours after the coffee, eat a protein-anchored meal. Here is why each element matters specifically. The walk during the ketone window is one of the most time-efficient health investments available to anyone over 60. When your muscles are active during a state where ketones are elevated and insulin is low, they draw directly on circulating fatty acids and ketones as fuel, deepening and extending the fat-burning period. The walk also activates a mechanism in muscle cells called GLUT4 translocation, where physical activity moves glucose transporters to the cell surface, improving insulin sensitivity for hours afterward. One short morning walk taken at the right metabolic moment produces insulin sensitizing effects that carry well into the afternoon. This is not from a long, exhausting session. This is from 15 minutes of walking timed correctly. The protein-anchored meal 2 to 3 hours later matters because of how ketones and protein interact in the context of muscle preservation. After 60, your body's ability to use dietary protein to build and maintain muscle weakens. This is called anabolic resistance. One of the most effective responses to anabolic resistance is to consume protein in a low insulin, anti-catabolic hormonal environment, rather than spiking insulin with carbohydrates first. The morning ketone window creates exactly that environment. The protein finds your muscles in a state where they are most receptive to the amino acids arriving. The building work happens more completely. This morning sequence requires no gym membership, no expensive equipment, and no dramatic changes to your schedule. It restructures the biology of the 45 minutes you are already spending drinking coffee and eating breakfast. And the cumulative metabolic benefit of doing this every day is far greater than the sum of its parts. Sleep is not passive recovery. It is your body's most active repair window. During deep sleep, your mitochondria do the majority of their maintenance and quality control work. Mitophagy, the clearing of damaged mitochondria, is most active at night. Growth hormone, which plays a central role in muscle preservation and fat burning, is released almost entirely during the first few cycles of deep sleep. Your brain's waste clearance system, which removes metabolic byproducts from neural tissue, operates primarily during deep sleep. Poor sleep significantly worsens insulin sensitivity. Research has shown that even a single night of inadequate sleep can reduce insulin sensitivity measurably the following day. Your cells require more insulin to process the same amount of glucose. Inflammation increases, fat storage tendency increases, and the fat-burning state you work to establish in your morning becomes harder for your body to sustain through the day. You can consume C8 MCT oil every morning consistently and still receive only partial benefit if your sleep is chronically poor, because the repair window that the morning metabolic signal is calling for is not being adequately provided. 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep is the recovery infrastructure on which every other element of this strategy builds. Give it the same intentional attention you are giving your morning coffee. Now, the practical side of getting started. The most common mistake people make is starting with too much C8 MCT oil too quickly. C8 is absorbed almost instantaneously compared to other dietary fats. If your digestive system has been processing primarily glucose and long-chain fats for decades and you start with a full tablespoon on day one, many people experience significant gastrointestinal discomfort. Cramping, bloating, loose stools. It is not dangerous, but it is unpleasant enough that most people stop entirely and miss all the benefits. The correct approach is a 3-week ramp. Week 1, 1 teaspoon per morning. Week 2, 2 teaspoons. Week 3, a full tablespoon. At that dose, the vast majority of people are fully adapted with zero discomfort. And at 1 tablespoon per morning on an empty stomach, you are generating a consistent BHB response sufficient to produce the metabolic shifts we have discussed. Blend the MCT oil into your coffee rather than stirring it. Blending creates an emulsification that disperses the oil evenly, significantly improves taste and texture, and makes the habit far more sustainable. And pay attention to coffee quality. Low-quality commodity coffee can contain mold-derived compounds called mycotoxins that are invisible and tasteless but can contribute to the brain fog and fatigue. This strategy is designed to counter. Light to medium roast, single-origin coffee preserves more of the beneficial antioxidant compounds in the bean and works with the strategy rather than against it. Now let me address the calories question directly. A tablespoon of C8 MCT oil contains approximately 100 to 130 calories. On the surface, adding calories when the goal is fat loss seems counterproductive. But C8 MCT oil consumed in a fasted state produces a minimal insulin response. Blood sugar does not rise. Your body does not shift into glucose processing mode. The C8 goes directly to the liver, converts to BHB, And those ketones actively suppress ghrelin, your primary hunger hormone, while providing the brain with a stable fuel source that eliminates the mid-morning energy crash that drives snacking. What most people find in practice is that the morning MCT oil reduces appetite for 3 to 5 hours afterward. The calories added in the morning are more than compensated for by the reduction in calories consumed later. The net caloric picture is frequently neutral or negative. But more importantly than the calorie arithmetic is the metabolic mode question. You are not adjusting a number on a ledger. You are changing the biological state your body operates in. And body composition changes happen through metabolic environment, not through calorie counting alone. Let me also address the question of whether this works if your overall diet is not perfect. You do not need to follow a low carbohydrate or ketogenic diet for C8 MCT oil to produce meaningful benefits. The morning ketone window operates on its own metabolic logic regardless of what you eat at lunch or dinner. Think of it not as switching your entire metabolism permanently to a different mode, but as giving your body a consistent daily practice. A signal that, repeated every morning, gradually builds metabolic flexibility. Your body gets better at using fat as fuel. Your mitochondria become more accustomed to ketones. And over months, even outside the morning window, your body becomes more efficient at shifting between fuel sources. Consistency over time outperforms perfection in any single day. Let me also address insulin sensitivity specifically, because this is one of the most important metabolic variables for people over 60, and most people have never had it explained to them in a way that makes the stakes clear. Insulin sensitivity refers to how effectively your cells respond to the insulin your body produces. When cells are highly insulin sensitive, a small amount of insulin is sufficient to move glucose from the bloodstream into cells for use. When sensitivity declines, your body needs to produce more and more insulin to accomplish the same job. Think of it like a lock that is getting harder to turn. Your body keeps making more keys trying to force it open. Here is what most people over 60 do not know about themselves. Most exist somewhere in the middle of the spectrum between fully healthy insulin sensitivity and clinical insulin resistance without knowing it. Their fasting blood sugar may still read as technically normal on a standard blood test, but their insulin sensitivity has meaningfully declined from what it was at 35. And that decline, even without a diagnosis, is actively affecting their energy, body composition, hormonal balance, and cognitive function in ways that feel like aging but are actually metabolic. Morning ketone production directly improves insulin sensitivity through multiple mechanisms. When your body is burning fat and producing ketones, your cells are not being constantly exposed to insulin surges. The receptor sensitivity that had been dulled by chronic overstimulation begins to recover. Additionally, the improvement in mitochondrial function that BHB supports directly contributes to better insulin sensitivity at the cellular level. Better mitochondria means better glucose disposal. Better glucose disposal means less insulin required. Less insulin means less fat storage, less inflammation, and better hormonal function. The entire cascade of improvements from one morning change runs through interconnected systems in ways that are genuinely significant. Now, let me bring everything together by talking about biological age, because this is where the full impact of the strategy becomes clear. Your chronological age is the number of years since you were born. It is fixed, but your biological age, which reflects the actual functional state of your cells and organs, is not fixed. Research in epigenetics, the study of how gene expression is influenced by environment and behavior, has documented that biological age can diverge significantly from chronological age in either direction. People with identical chronological ages can have biological ages that differ by 15 to 20 years, depending on their metabolic health, inflammatory status, mitochondrial function, and lifestyle patterns. This is not theoretical. It is measurable with clinical tools that assess what researchers call epigenetic clocks. These clocks read chemical markers on your DNA that reflect the cumulative impact of your lifestyle and metabolic environment on your cellular aging rate. The morning strategy we have discussed addresses nearly every factor that epigenetic age research has identified as a primary driver of accelerated biological aging: mitochondrial decline, chronic low-grade inflammation, loss of metabolic flexibility, stem cell depletion, insulin resistance, hormonal disruption from visceral fat. These are the biological levers that separate someone who is 65 chronologically but functioning biologically like they are 75 from someone who is 65 chronologically but functioning biologically like they are 55. And you can begin influencing all of these levers tomorrow morning. Before we get into how long results take to appear, I want to take a moment on something that I think creates important context. And that is what the trajectory looks like when these three biological processes are not addressed. When mitochondrial decline continues unchecked, the energy deficit compounds over time. Most people experience this as a gradual but relentless narrowing of their daily functional window. They have good energy for a shorter part of the day. They need more recovery time after exertion. Eventually, activities that were once routine begin to feel like real effort. The decline is slow enough that many people do not notice how much capacity they have lost until something brings it into sharp contrast, such as a photograph from 10 years ago or a conversation with someone their age who is still genuinely vibrant. When stem cell depletion continues unchecked, the body loses its ability to maintain itself effectively. This is partly visible in things like slower wound healing and longer recovery from illness, but it is also happening invisibly in places like the gut lining, the blood vessel walls, and the brain. The structures that make up your biology need constant maintenance, and when the maintenance crew is depleted, small degradations accumulate across every system simultaneously. When glucose dependency continues without interruption, the chronic insulin elevation it produces begins to affect the brain in ways that are measurable but slow. Research now consistently identifies insulin resistance in the brain as one of the early metabolic changes associated with cognitive decline. Some researchers refer to advanced neurological insulin resistance by a term you may have heard: type 3 diabetes. The mechanism involves neurons losing their ability to efficiently use glucose for energy, creating a local energy deficit in the brain that compromises memory, processing speed, and executive function over time. This is not meant to be alarming. It is meant to be clarifying, because understanding what the untreated trajectory looks like makes the morning strategy feel less like an optional optimization and more like what it actually is: a genuine and accessible intervention point, a place where you can begin changing the direction of these processes with something you already do every morning. The biology responds. That is the single most important thing to understand after everything we have discussed. It is not locked in. The cellular environment can be shifted, and it responds more readily than most people expect when it is given the right signal consistently. Here is how long it takes to see results you can actually notice. Within the first week, most people notice improved mental clarity and more stable morning energy. These early changes are direct. The brain is receiving a better fuel supply from day one. Within 2 to 4 weeks, the broader adaptations appear. Afternoon energy is more stable, appetite is better regulated, physical endurance during daily activity improves. The longer-term changes, measurable shifts in body composition, reduced visceral fat, improved muscle preservation, better metabolic markers, typically require 2 to 3 months of consistent daily practice. These are structural changes: the building of new mitochondria, the gradual reduction of chronic inflammatory burden. These processes cannot be rushed. They operate on biological timescales. Most people measure progress too quickly and stop too early. The biology is working. The cellular changes are accumulating. Give it the time it takes, and the results become undeniable. Now I want to address something that I hear from patients and viewers consistently. If this information exists, if the research supports it, why has nobody told me this before? The honest answer is structural. The conventional medical system is organized around disease management, not metabolic optimization. When you visit your doctor complaining of fatigue after 60, the workflow checks for diagnosable pathology. If nothing crosses a diagnostic threshold, the conversation ends with the phrase, "This video started with." This is part of aging. There is no standard clinical protocol for addressing metabolic flexibility decline in a person who does not yet have a diagnosable disease. The decline is real, the research is extensive, but it falls into a gap between fully healthy and officially sick. And most people spend years in that gap experiencing progressive decline while being told nothing is technically wrong. This is not a conspiracy. It is a structural limitation. Doctors are trained to diagnose and treat named conditions within appointments that cannot accommodate detailed metabolic education. The research exists, the biology is understood, but the translation of that research into practical guidance for people over 60 has been frustratingly slow. Understanding why this gap exists helps you appreciate that the absence of a clinical conversation does not mean the absence of evidence. You now have the information, and the most important thing you can do with it is act on it consistently. Your chronological age is fixed. It moves in one direction. You cannot negotiate with it, but your biological age, which reflects the actual functional state of your cells, is not fixed. Research in epigenetics has documented that biological age can diverge significantly from chronological age in either direction. People with identical chronological ages can have biological ages that differ by 15 to 20 years depending on their metabolic health, inflammatory status, and mitochondrial function. This is not theoretical. It is